Ah! Damn it. I lost. Well, yeah, well. So, basically I'm playing my, this is a, what's called a Raspberry Pi, and it's playing a gaming system on it, sort of like an operating system on it. The particular operating system I'm running on this is a system called Recallbox. So I recently had some family over, and they seem to actually, you know, get a kick out of this system. And as you can see, I got, you know, lots of arcade games and whatnot on here. It's basically what this does is it emulates all of these different platforms. This has been around ever since the Raspberry Pi came out. And in case you're wondering what the Raspberry Pi is, it's just it's basically a single board computer. And so a lot of my quite a few family members were impressed by it, and some of the family members were actually wanting me to build these for Christmas presents. So in this particular video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how, you know, basically I'll show you where to get all the parts to do this. I'll also go into the process of actually building the Raspberry Pi and installing the software. So if you happen to want to do this, you can do this as well. Now the one thing I can't show you during this video is I can't show you where to get the games that you're going to play on this. They're what's called ROMs, and ROM stands for read-only memory. But the reason why I can't show you where to get the games is because it's a little bit of a gray area as far as legal things. So I can't sit there and just show you where you can get the games. But if you do a Google search and you just search for game ROMs or video game ROMs or Raspberry Pi game ROMs, you should be able to find it pretty easy. So, all right. So, without further ado, let's go out over to my office and we'll start putting this together. All right. So we're in my office, and so basically, what I have on this little table right here. This is all of the pieces parts that you need to build a RetroPie. So the main component of the RetroPie is the Raspberry Pi, and right here, as you can see, these are quite small. This is the Raspberry Pi Model 3 B+. This is the out of all the Raspberry Pi, the parts that that they make, the single board computers they make, this is the most powerful one. This is the fastest and stuff. So with this, you can, as far as when you're running, if you're running Recallbox like I am, or if you're doing RetroPie, which is what I'm going to be showing, this can emulate like PS1 games. That's probably one of the latest platforms. It can do some PSP games. Nintendo 64 can do some Nintendo 64. Some of those, the later game systems like that, you have to basically try the games and see if they'll actually run. Some of them are not going to run, some of them will run. Pretty much anything older, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, those will run flawless on this. It'll be just like playing it back when you were a kid. So we got a Raspberry Pi, and I have an enclosure because essentially what this is, and I'll, you know, see if I can get it out of the box. Boy, I got this box sealed up. Alright, as you can see, is just a single board computer. It's just a little computer board. Well, you know, you can just use this just like this, but it's not really practical. So what you have is you get a small little enclosure. Other things, what we have here, this is basically a wired controller for Xbox One. So it's Amazon, and this will work with your Windows computer, and or it can work with an Xbox or whatever. But essentially, that's what this is this is a an Xbox-like game controller, and that's what we're going to use to play the games on the Raspberry Pi. So I got two of them, you know, one player, two player. The other important piece of this whole pie, that's funny. The other important piece of this is basically you need a micro SD card. So that's what I have here. And this is a 256 gig, which is going to hold a lot of games. So I bought one of the larger sizes. You can get up to a 400 gig SD card. You want to make sure it's a very fast speed. As you can tell, this guy here, this says speeds up to 100 megabits per second, which is a pretty fast speed. You want it, the faster the speed, the better. This, believe it or not, the SD cards are probably one of the most expensive thing. I think individually, this is the most expensive thing of this whole entire build, is this. Essentially, if you're familiar with computers, this is like the hard drive, this is the storage, the OS, everything, games, all of that are stored here. So theoretically, if you set this up, you could have multiple Raspberry Pis, and you can just pop this in and out of multiple Raspberry Pis. Another good thing, if you're interested in, is you could do a YouTube search for what's called a game hat. What a game hat does is it takes a Raspberry Pi and makes it into a portable handheld. It's kind of cool. Anywho, that's what you're saying you're going to need. And you're going to need power. So what I got here is a basically it's a power supply. This particular one, these are 5 volt, 3 amp power supplies. And I bought a 2-pack of them because basically I'm building 2 of these. You only seen the pieces, parts of the one, but I needed a power supply for each one. Now this particular power supply also comes with a little on and off switch, but that's not necessarily required. So that is all of the pieces, parts that you are going to need to build this. And then you're probably also going to need some tools, more than likely a Phillips head screwdriver. The other piece that you don't see here, it's pretty common that everybody usually has them, is an HDMI cable. You're going to need an HDMI cable to come out from here and display it either on a TV or this computer display or whatever. You're going to need HDMI. And that's pretty much it. These guys are very, they're not that expensive, so if you actually, if you damage it or blow it up or whatever, I mean, they're really not that expensive to replace. It's like $30, you know, $30, $35 to buy one of these. So this isn't very expensive either. Like I said, the main cost is in the SD card. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to sit these controllers down and set this down because I don't need it yet. And I'm going to set this over here on my computer. And right now we're going to be concentrating on the Raspberry Pi and the Pi enclosure. Okay, I'm going to try and open this box a little bit more gently than that one because essentially I'm going to be packing it back in here. Like I said, this is going to be a Christmas gift. So we get the little enclosure, pretty simple. Nothing else left in the box. And we get the all-important instructions. Not sure if this actually has screws. Some of these cases are actually, they just kind of clamp together. So I'm not sure. It's the first time I've ever bought this particular case. So we go through here and put that down there. And it looks like, yeah, looks like I need to read the instructions. Oh, okay, here we go. So the whole little top piece comes off. I'm just gonna, yeah. Open the top panel. That's what actually it says right here on the instructions. Now this particular case that I bought also includes some heat sinks, which is really cool and helpful. It also includes a fan, and looks like this has some very small screws. So I'm hoping that I have a screwdriver up here. If not, I might have to go get one. We have one. Okay. And then it has another little bag in here that looks like it's going to be a pain to get out. These tweezers aren't exactly my best. There we are. Wow, was that a pain in the butt. Okay. Okay. So looking at the instructions, it says install the copper ram heatsink on your Pi. So basically, we got these various different heat sinks. And what they have is like a peel and stick type tape. So we have these two pieces here, and I have this small piece of copper. And it says install the copper ram heatsink onto your Pi. So according to this picture, you want to actually flip this guy upside down. It is right there. So we want to put this guy onto the ram. Try to get the peel and stick. Wow. Yeah, this is probably going to be the most tedious part of this entire build. And the important reason you want to include these heat sinks is because these little single board computers do get quite hot. There we go. Man, it's gonna stick to me. So because they do get quite hot, this actually does help out quite a bit with heat disbursement. Okay, and don't be afraid to handle these. They're, you know, you don't have to wear like a static cuff or like be really. It's probably not the most terrible thing to do something like that if you're too concerned. Make sure, you know, the best thing probably is to do is try to handle it around the edges as much as possible, but you know, you can touch it. They're not that overly sensitive. Okay. I mean, it's actually quite, there we go. It's good that it actually holds in quite tightly. So basically right now, what I'm going to be doing is attaching this to the case. So we're going to take this guy, and I'm not sure how well you can see there, but there's some small little spots there for where you actually put the screws down in. And you set the pie in. And right here on the back, this little notch, that's your SD card, where you would put your SD card in and out. So, of course, you know, you want to make sure that tells you the way you have to have the board put in. Okay, so I'm going to grab, got a little pouch here, some screws. Got little rubber feet. Be careful not to lose the screws. It looks like they kindly give you an extra in case you happen to lose one. Here we go. Alright, got the first screw in. When you put these screws in, you want to put them in actually, you don't have to really torque on them. You know, I mean, you don't have to, they don't have to be very tight. This is just to keep it from jiggling around in there. Trust me, this case is so small, and all of this is actually going to hold all this fairly well in place. Really, the screws more of a formality. You know, it's good to have, but not really required. Okay, there we go. Now that's all not going anywhere. Like I said, doesn't need to be torqued on it. Alright. So next thing it's got here is basically it says mount the pie into the case, blah blah blah, we did that. Put the middle case on the pie and then install the CPU and the LAN heatsink. So basically they want us to put this back on. So we're going to do that. Not sure why they want, I'm actually going to break the instructions. I'm not going to follow them, because I can tell you right now, if you put that middle case on and you don't install these heat sinks, I can just kind of tell by looking at it, this is going to be a pain in the butt otherwise. So what I'm going to do is put the heat sinks on now. And hopefully it turns out to be a good idea. Man, these, I built a couple of these pies. I can say one thing there about this kit is this double-sided tape that they got on there. Pain in the butt getting it off. All right, there we go. Now we're going to put this on, and doing good, and there we go. See, and if I'm not sure how well you can see there, if I wouldn't have did that heat sink before putting that together, that would have been a pain right there, I can tell you that much. Okay, and it looks like the fan probably mounts to that. And install the fan in the top panel. Pay attention to the direction of the fan, then use a small headed screwdriver and mount the fan. Okay. Alrighty. And just like with the board, when I was putting the screws in for that, you don't want to crank on these screws by any stretch of imagination. Just as soon as you feel, you know, any least amount of resistance, you gotta remember this is just plastic. So if you really, you know, try to screw these in really, like, oh, I'm gonna make this really tight. This doesn't need to be really tight. You will just, you'll break the little piece of plastic off. The next thing you know, you can't use the case. So that's pretty much it. Now the next thing we need to do is connect the pins, connect these little power lines to the pins, and you have a red wire and a black wire. There we go. So looking at the instructions, which are, I'm going to be honest with you, these instructions are like microscopic. And I'm going to run this as a full speed fan. Wow. These instructions are dinky. I might actually have to Google this to make sure I get this into the right pin. Because this is such a small drawing they have here. I don't even think even perfect, I don't have perfect eyesight, but even someone with perfect eyesight would have a hard time seeing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop on the computer and I'm going to Google that, and essentially, you know, like I said, the next thing is you would hook this power line up to there. Then at that point in time, this case is pretty much ready to go. You would basically put this little plastic top back on here, push it all tight, and they gave you some little like rubber feet for it. And you would put the rubber feet on here, which is what I'm doing now. And that is it. Case is assembled. As you can tell, very dinky. They don't take up a lot of space. They don't make a lot of noise. You're going to barely hear the humming of the fan. This is actually, now that I've actually, it's the first time I've ever used this case, but I can tell you right now, this is a very nice case, a very well designed case. And it, you know, includes all the heat sinks, which is nice. And yeah, I'm actually quite happy with it. So pretty much what you have here is with your outside ports. You have your USBs, that's where you plug in your controllers. So you can, right out of the gate, just run 4 controllers. You have your Ethernet port. This is for your networking. These Raspberry Pis also have Wi-Fi, so you don't necessarily have to hook that up if you use the Wi-Fi. On the back side here, you have your HDMI, your power in. You got your slot here for your SD card, and it's pretty much at that point in time, you're ready to rock and roll. Alright, so we're going to switch over to the computer now, and I'll show you how to take your SD card, which is this guy right here, and I'll show you how to get the, where you can go and get the, where you can get Recall Box if you're interested in Recall Box. I can show you where to get that, and then I can show you where to get RetroPie. Those are images are readily available. So you download the image, and then I'll show you what software you use to burn those images to this SD card, and then at that point in time, you're ready to go. So let's switch over to the computer. All right, so now that we finished the assembly process, which I have my nice assembled Raspberry Pi here, we're going to go ahead and begin the process of taking the image that you download off the internet, and burning it to the SD card that we purchased, and that will basically set up our gaming device. So essentially the image is the, like I said, it's basically the operating system and there are two images that you can use. Well, there's a lot of images you can use on a Raspberry Pi, but for retro gaming, there's two primary resources. There is what's called RetroPie, and I have all of these links that I'm showing you. They'll all be in the description of the video. And also I have links to on Amazon to where I purchased all the little pieces, parts, and components that I'm using. So, anywho, RetroPie is this is pretty much what I'm going to be using, and basically you got two versions of it. You got what can run on a Raspberry Pi 0 or 1. We don't have a Raspberry Pi 0 or 1, or you have what's called Raspberry Pi 0, 2 or 3. This is what we have. We have a Raspberry Pi 3. So you would actually click here, click the download. What that's going to do is pop up. You just find a place to store this. And you notice that the file is basically it's .img.gz. GZ is a zip format. So basically once you finish downloading this, you have to then unzip it. And what I recommend to use as far as unzipping it is a program called 7-Zip. It's a free program, and basically, you know, everything I'm showing you, just by the way, as far as all the software, is all free. You don't have to buy the software to do it. So, so once you got that downloaded, you know, you're pretty much ready to go. Another version you could use is what's called Recalbox. I can tell you right now, RetroPie is pretty much more the common version that people use for retro gaming with a Raspberry Pi. You take like my Raspberry Pi that I'm running, it's got Recalbox, and it's just because it's what I had on there installed and was trying it out and using it. So let's see. So Recalbox is giving the future to the past. So that's the other version you can run, and here's the download for that. You click download, and it's going to ask you similar to what I showed you on Raspberry Pi. It's going to ask you which version. So Recalbox will run on some Odroid versions as well. They have PC versions, in case you're interested. So we would choose right here, Pi 3. And it's also going to be in an archive format, which is archive format is called XZ. WinZip will also be able to extract that as well. Okay, so that is the two versions that you can do. Now, you can install Raspberry Pi, you can install Recalbox or RetroPie. Now, those basically are just the OS. There's no games on those images. You have to do some configuration if you want to use things like Bezel Project. If you want, you have to install some emulators in there. You have to have a certain level of technical skills to be able to start with just a blank image. Just be blunt. What a lot of people do is they get what's called a RetroPie loaded image. And I'm just going to pull up a Google search that I did. RetroPie loaded image. And as you can see, you get some YouTube videos here. Here's like Drew Talks. Here's Arcade Punk's channel. And then some Reddit and so forth. So if you just Google that, you'll see a lot of links and all that. Basically, I can tell you right now, the #1 resource for RetroPie loaded images is Arcade Punks. Okay, so, and this is what a lot of people run when they're trying to set up a retro gaming system. Loaded images are great. They come with all the games. They come pre-configured with a lot of things. If you're not a tinkerer and you just want to get right into gameplay, that's the best way to go. Problem with using things like that is technically if you own a ROM, if you own a game ROM and you don't own the actual game. So say I own Super Mario Brothers on a Nintendo Entertainment System, and I have the game ROM. I also have the cartridge. Technically, that's legal. But if you have the ROM and you don't have the game cartridge, technically that's not legal. So just want to let everybody know that that's how it goes. So basically, the steps on what you would do once you get your image, whether you use a recall box image or you use a RetroPie image or you do a fully loaded image, you're going to use basically SD card formatter to format that image to format your SD card. Then you use Etcher, a program called Etcher, and like I said, I'll have all the links to actually burn the image to your SD card. Once you have that done, you essentially you can't do anything with the image at that point. Once it's do anything with the SD card at that point on your computer. At this point, everything you need to do is on the Raspberry Pi itself. Essentially, Raspberry Pi runs sort of like a Linux OS. So you know, Linux, Windows don't exactly 100% communicate. Now the thing is that, well, how do you manage it? Well, there's some tools that you can use to there's like a browser-based tool you can use that you install on the Raspberry Pi to where you can open up your web browser, and as long as you're on the same network, you can drag and drop games, and there's other tools that you can use to communicate with your Raspberry Pi. I'm not going to go into all those details. There's tons of YouTube videos out there already that go into those details. All you have to do is just do a quick search, and I can tell you right now, ETA Prime. You go to ETA Prime's YouTube channel. He has this all covered, and that's how I learned how to do everything that I'm doing right now. So basically, I already have my SD card formatted. I got it right here. It's 256 gig SD card. I called it RetroPie. I'm going to go ahead and pull up Etcher. And give this like a couple seconds to load. There we go. And so I'm going to select image. And got my image, select my drive, and hit continue, right? That's my M drive. Just double check to make sure you have the right drive, because you don't want to accidentally wipe something out. And now I'm going to click flash. It is unusually large. Do you want to flash? I'm going to say yes. And basically you get the, while you're waiting, you know, here we go. So this is going to take quite a little bit of time to basically burn this image. So instead of me having you stand around watching watching this process, kick back in once this is all done, and you know, we'll go on to the next step, which pretty much is really just plugging the SD card back into the Raspberry Pi, and then basically you know, we had to do some first run setup, which is configuring the game controllers, and then that's it. That's all she is. That's all that's to this. So as soon as this is finished, we'll pop back in. So I put the SD card into the thing, and it's loading up emulation station, and it gives me the one gamepad detected. That's what I have hooked in there. So I'm going to set up the gamepad here real quick. At this point in time, you can also hit F4. So essentially that's if you hook up a keyboard. So I'm going to hold a button down. There we go. Xbox. So D-pad up. So I'm going to go up, down, and then left, right. We'll say start, select, A, B, X, Y. See, left shoulder, right shoulder, left trigger. Whoops. Oh, I skipped over one. That's alright. We'll get this here next time. Alright, right thumb. So we're going to go right thumb, left analog up, down, left, right, up, down, left, right, and then the hotkey. Okay. And there we go. So, there's no sound because I don't have anything hooked up to this. But this particular image that I'm using has 12,767 games to it. So let's go ahead and let's select Arcade Classics. Let's try a game. And we're going to select that. And we got the load screens. And looks like the game's loading up. It's looking pretty good. Looks like I still have some configuration to do here because I'm trying to exit out by hitting the hotkey, but it's not quite responding. So a few little bit tweaks and configurations I have to do to get this finished up, but as you can see, it's pretty much a working image. This is just more or less configurations of the actual game control, so not too big of a deal. What I'll probably do is I'll hit the I'll plug a keyboard in and exit out of the game, because like I said, my hotkeys aren't not working. So here we go. But that's essentially got it going. At this point in time, I just need to do some tweaks, like I said, on my keypad, my gamepad configuration. So that pretty much is going to wrap up this video. And if you have more further questions about setting up this type of system or whatever, like I said, there's all kinds of resources available on YouTube, but I'll be also willing to answer any questions. Just leave anything in the comments, and I'll help you out as much as I can. Yeah, have a good one.